Welcome into episode 250 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridgette Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridgette and Scott, there's a bit of a lull in the Bruins schedule midweek, so we are doing our one of our new mailbag episodes where listeners have a chance to give us any questions that they want regarding the Bruins. And there's a lot of them this week to get to, so we're going to do just that. But first and foremost, Bridgette and Scott, how are you guys today?
I'm good. Just got back from a Bruins optional practice as we sit here and record. Gotta say, not a ton of news came out of that, but which makes it even better that we're doing a mailbag. Fill some time.
Who optionally practiced?
Actually, most of the team was on the ice, and they were all in the building because they still had a team video session. So no one had like a complete day off.
Well, that makes sense, especially since they've been saying they haven't gotten a lot of practice. But yeah, and I'm good, guys. I am doing great. Tired. For me, I feel like a college kid. I'm like ready for winter break because then I have a few weeks off from doing broadcast. So I'm ready for winter break, guys. My final exams are almost over, and I can maybe sleep.
You're tired, but you're ready to answer some fan questions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let us get right into it. First question is an email from Tom. What do you think of the Noah Hanifin rumors? The Bruins were interested in him before. He would be a great fit. Could they get him? In addition to Tom's question, we're also going to skip ahead to a question we got on Twitter from what we think is Scott's alias. Just kidding, it's not. But Bridgette's favorite account, which is Don's Weenie. And his question is, at this point in the season, how much of an upgrade, if any, is someone like Elias Lindholm over Zacha and Coyle? The main benefit would likely be the ability to move Zacha/Coyle to wing, but they could get a winger for cheaper than Lindholm. Is adding center worth it? So basically, Lindholm, Hanifin, Flames, Bruins. What do you guys think?
First of all, No, I need to respond first here because I was busy trying to look up something about Noah Hanifin when I hear Brian say Don's Weenie is Bridgette's favorite Twitter account, and I did not have a chance to respond because my mic was off because I was Google searching. So I mean,
it makes you laugh all the time. You know what I mean? You know what I meant. Come on now.
It does make me laugh.
We keep it family friendly on the pod.
It does.
Bridgette, you told us that right before we went live. You said that was your favorite.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just we'll go there, and you know what, Scott, you can take over from here.
Yeah. So obviously, we've talked about this going back to the offseason, saying like the Flames were going to be probably the most interesting team to watch when it comes to the trade market because they have so many pending free agents and really haven't been able to lock any of them up. And we've already seen them move. Nikita Zadorov got traded to Vancouver. I know, that was a name that some Bruins fans were interested in because he is a very physical defender. But yeah, Noah Hanifin is still there, still not signed to an extension. Elias Lindholm, still not signed to an extension. Wasn't mentioned in these questions, but Chris Tanev's another one who seems like he's almost certainly going to be traded. Another solid defenseman. So I guess I'll start with the Lindholm one, which is, how much of an upgrade would he really be? And I think the interesting thing here is, to me, in a way, this is almost about how much you trust what you're seeing with the Bruins right now. Because if you trust Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle to continue playing the way that they've played and to continue to produce like top six centers, and if you trust Matt Poitras to be a third line center all season and not have some sort of, real drop off at some point, then you probably don't need an Elias Lindholm. Like, sure, if a surefire number one center hit the market, you probably have to ask around. But, Elias Lindholm to me is a really good player who kind of does everything. But it's not like he's a superstar, right? Like his 1 year topping 80 points was the year that his line mates were Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. And they all kind of went off as a line. Otherwise, he's like consistently a really solid 60 to 70 point guy, which is really good, but is also like a pace that Zacha and Coyle are on right now. So, I was looking into 5-on-5 production, and Zacha, since he got to Boston, has been higher than Elias Lindholm. Lindholm previously has generally been higher than Charlie Coyle in 5-on-5 production, but this year Coyle's higher. Lindholm has dipped a little bit there. So, yeah, like at this exact moment with the way all of them are playing, I don't think Elias Lindholm would be a huge upgrade. And for that reason, I don't think he'd be worth the price that it's going to cost to get him. But if 2 months from now he's still available and Poitras dropped off and Coyle's come back towards, sort of his like career norms and isn't having a career year, maybe you revisit it. But I guess at this moment, I wouldn't be in a rush to go give up, multiple high-end assets for Elias Lindholm. And since I just talked for a while, I'll let, I guess, you guys respond on Lindholm first, and then we can get into Hanifin.
Yeah, because two completely separate pieces. But yeah, so I think that, like you mentioned, Scott, the centers think, like, I guess it was more of a question in the off season, like especially before anyone had any idea who Matt Poitras was, maybe needing to add a center at this point. But as of right now, it doesn't look like they need to, like you mentioned. I still don't think Poitras, I mean, I think Poitras is completely inadequate third line center for the Bruins. We had a bunch of questions about him, so we will get into him for sure. Big chunk of the episode, actually, because I feel like 70% of the questions, maybe more, were Poitras related. And he ties into this as well. But I just, like you mentioned, Scott, I think that the asking price is probably too high. And the cap situation is what the cap situation is, and doesn't allow you to have much flexibility. I know Don's Weenie on Twitter mentioned maybe adding Lindholm or another center so that you might be able to move Zacha or Coyle back to wing. It would, I mean, I guess by adding a center, you're to create more winger depth. Like, I don't know if that's really what you want to do, or you just want to add a winger rather than be like, okay, we're gonna have this center and Zacha's now our winger again. Because I think the long-term plan with Zacha is that he's gonna stick and settle as a center. So like not keep bouncing him back and forth probably would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I mean, I don't think adding Lindholm 1-for-1 is a major upgrade over Coyle and or Zacha as individuals, but if you're trading for Lindholm, I would imagine Zacha and Coyle aren't going the other way. So it's just a matter of adding strength and numbers up the middle, and a little bit of versatility. Because, and again, Bridgette kind of mentioned, but like we'll get to Poitras, but it's just he's not a sure thing this year as a. It just remains to be seen. Like I've liked what I've seen so far, but it's tough to sit here and say right now in December, like, yeah, I feel totally comfortable with Zacha, Coyle, and Poitras as your top three centers in a deep playoff run. It's a lot to ask of all of them. You're talking about three guys that are being asked to play in a role that they haven't had to play so far. Poitras being
all four centers, actually. Beecher too,
exactly. So I always think that center is, you can never have too much strength up the middle. The ask, I don't know what the ask would be. I don't think, I mean, whatever. I think maybe like what would Lindholm go for? What would they want for him? Like a first round pick, a Lysell, or like I don't even like, because nobody on the Bruins roster that the Bruins would be willing to give up obviously would go the other way. And then besides that, it's kind of a bunch of like journeyman / like bargain pieces on the Bruins roster currently. So
well, yeah, and I mean, to Bridgette's point about the cap, though, like someone from the current roster would have to be going out, whether it's to Calgary or in a separate trade or a third team involved or something. Like, obviously, they have very minimal cap space. So for either, I mean, Elias Lindholm's at $4.85 million. for this year. Noah Hanifin's 4.95. Chris Tanev's $4.5 million. So like any of those guys, like someone has to be going out salary wise. So, yeah, for me, talking about these potential, Flames who could potentially be traded, like I see Tanev as kind of a little bit of a duplication of Brandon Carlo, like solid right shot defenseman, really good defensively, minimal offense, not overly physical. I don't think that really makes a ton of sense for the Bruins. Noah Hanifin to me is the one who interests me the most because like he's sort of been a little bit of a white whale for the Bruins. It feels like they've been linked to him a bunch, going all the way back to the draft when the Bruins, made those trades that landed them 3 first-round picks. All the rumors at the time were that they wanted to trade up, and their target was Noah Hanifin, and obviously that didn't happen. They kept the 3 picks, and we know how that went. But Hanifin's still 26. He's in his prime. Still has several of his prime years left. Has size at 6'3", great skater, really good defensively, contributes offensively. Most importantly, maybe stays healthy. I was looking at this. His career, like games played by year, is basically always like 78, 80, 81. The 2 COVID shortened seasons, like he played all 70 in 2020 when that year got cut off. He's played all 24 so far this season. When we're talking about the Bruins defense and like looking for potential upgrades, you kind of always come back to, Matt Grzelcyk struggles to get through the full season and get through the playoffs healthy. Hanifin does that, and it really has the all-around game that if you put him in a top 4 with McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, like you have the best top 4 in the NHL. Like that in some ways kind of different style player, but like kind of duplicates what you tried to do with Dmitry Orlov last year. Obviously, the sticking point here is what does that mean for Mason Lohrei? Like, is he involved in the trade? Because you're going to have to give up a lot to get Noah Hanifin. Would acquiring Hanifin and presumably trying to sign him to an extension, would that, does that block Lohrei? Like, what does that mean there? So that's the bigger takeaway. But like of the potential Flames, just on the surface and just how he could fit right now in the Bruins, I think I like the idea of Hanifin the best.
I couldn't agree more. I would move Lohrei in a heartbeat for Noah Hanifin. I mean, it's again, if Mason Lohrei were 18, that'd be one thing. He's turning 23, right? In January, Scott?
Yeah.
And Hanifin's 26. And you're talking about a guy who's a bona fide, like, number 1 defenseman in the NHL. And you're talking about a guy that maybe has top 4 potential. Honestly, I don't even know why Calgary would do it, if not maybe just to try to optimize an asset that might be out of town at some point for nothing. I don't know.
Well, who might be out of town after this season? He's right. A pending free agent, and supposedly they were close on an extension earlier this season, and then basically the reports are like Hanifin walked away from the table and was like, "Now I want to see how things play out a little longer."
Yeah.
His contract. He's a free agent at the end of this season. It's like a 4.5, or I think it's like a 4.5 or 4 3/4. Yeah, almost $5 million contract that Hanifin has right now and his only like trade restriction is he has an 8-team no trade list, which I doubt Boston would be on. Like, I don't want to go
especially
there.
not since he's a local guy. I'm sure.
No,
he would love to be a Bruin.
Yeah, I think so. And who wouldn't want to be, playing next to Charlie McAvoy or I'm pretty sure that sounds like a sweet deal to him, especially if the Bruins are in a position, at the top of the conference or at the top of the division again. So I don't think that would be an issue. In terms of acquiring him, like you mentioned, I could see them taking Lohrei as a really big piece in that trade. Because, like you mentioned, like you're going to lose Hanifin anyway, probably if you're in a place when negotiations have gone south and you don't think he's going to come back, or at least like there's a pretty good chance he's not. You're getting something that you're going to be able to hold on to because he's still under his rookie contract. And Lohrei is obviously the Bruins' top defensive prospect, maybe their top prospect overall. I know we keep saying Lohrei is, Lysell is, but Lohrei may have passed him. I think that
I think so.
I do too.
So does Grzelcyk going the other way, like, also make that deal worth it? Because it's a roster player, and you're talking about somebody on the left side, and player for player, I don't care how much of a Matt Grzelcyk fan you are. Noah Hanifin is a clear upgrade over Matt Grzelcyk. I'm sorry, but he is. So okay, what in addition to so the Bruins are winning the trade there, right? You give away Grzelcyk, you get Hanifin, but then they also get your top prospect in Lohrei, and they aren't losing their top defenseman for nothing in free agency. I mean, I do that deal in a heartbeat. I know we pounded the whole like Scott, and I know you've said in the past, like, you don't want to give up depth on this blue line because you need depth on the blue line. And in this situation, you're giving away 2 left shot defensemen now. One's your top prospect and one's a viable, borderline top 4 defenseman, but probably a third pair deep man on a deep team. Do you guys do that trade if that's the trade?
I think
I would.
Me too.
Yeah, I do too, but I think that maybe the first approach by Sweeney would be to try to not lose 2 defensemen, maybe, keep Grzelcyk around and maybe try to move a winger but I just don't really know who else they would be interested in. But yeah, because of the depth, like we mentioned, Orlov coming in added depth. If you're sending 2 defensemen out and getting 1 in, obviously Hanifin's a big upgrade, but at that time of year, you still have value that, you might be able to say Grzelcyk got hurt, or you know what I mean? You have Lohrei there, or say Forberg got hurt. Like, you can bring Lohrei up. Now he's gone. Now he's not an option anymore. Just something to consider, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you'd be left, like, for left side options, it would be Ian Mitchell has played a little bit on the left, like that could be an option. And then if you look down in Providence, like it's Mike Callahan, who's having a really strong season down there, but has not played in the NHL yet. Jacob Zaboral obviously is still there.
Zaboral's time to shine.
Parker Wotherspoon we saw, for a couple of games. Like, yeah, it obviously there's no one really in that group where you're like, oh, I'd be totally comfortable. There's no one with the upside of a Lohrei that, you're looking at and you're like, boy, he could be, this guy could really help us later in the season. They're all kind of just plugins, but you got to give up something to get something. So push comes to shove, like, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. And
a big sticking point for me too is, and I said this earlier, but like, if Lohrei were an 18, 19-year-old player, that's one thing. But he's already in his early to mid 20s by the time next season rolls around. It's like, it's not. I mean, so that's the biggest thing when considering. I don't want to just give away Lohrei, but you're talking about Hanifin, who's 3 years older than Lohrei, and he's been doing it in the NHL at this level for 7-8 years now.
And like, I also think he'd be exactly the kind of player that I imagine would be very appealing to Calgary, because one, here they are trading away defensemen, like they're gonna have to replace them somehow. And 2, I don't think they want to go into a full rebuild. Craig Conroy has said that multiple times. So getting, a top prospect who's close to NHL ready, I think in some ways, like, that's probably more appealing to them than an 18-year-old who's 3 years away.
All right. So let's move on to the next question. And this is an email from Brian, who said, would there be any benefit to letting Matt Poitras play for Canada in World Juniors?
I don't really think so. He's helping you win NHL games right now, and he's been a fixture in your lineup. I don't know what he could learn by going to play World Juniors that he isn't learning at the NHL level. So that's a tough one. I know that debate comes up, every year. It seems like there's a couple players who are kind of in this situation, and, World Juniors is a great tournament, and I'm sure, 6 months ago is probably on Poitras' radar as something he really wanted to play in. But when you make the NHL and you stick on the NHL roster and you're playing every night, that I think most guys would tell you, that's in the end more valuable than going to play a World Junior tournament.
I think that a very simple answer is that who are you going to plug in if he leaves? Like, who is the Matt Poitras?
Morgan Geekie slides to center.
Yeah, but like, is that what I'm trying to say? Does that give you a better chance of winning? Like, how does that help you? Like, I don't see the value in sending him. Like,
I think the question more is kind of, Bridgette, do you think there's a benefit for Poitras to go down to the tournament?
Oh, no.
The only time I would say, like, the only situation where I could say maybe it might be beneficial is if he was like really struggling to put up points. Like, if we get closer to that time and he's gone 10 games without a point, like, there's something to the idea of, hey, go light up World Juniors. Remember what it feels like to score and put up a bunch of points. And he comes back with more confidence type thing. But even if like if he's keeping up, around a half of a point a game type pace, like, I don't think that's really in play.
So even that could be a gamble too, because what if he goes down and doesn't put up those points? Then he's really
like Fabian Lysell last year.
Exactly.
Second time around goes scoreless in 7 games. Like, that was not good.
I think so. The only benefit I could see is exactly what Scott just alluded to, which would be a potential confidence boost for him to put up some points. But personally, I don't like the Bruins making themselves vulnerable to clearly a player who is hoping to be a top 9 fixture for them getting hurt. Yes, he can get hurt in a Bruins game, but if he's going to take a shot off the ankle, I'd rather it be because he's playing for the Bruins and not Canadian international team. So I would say not really.
And I think that if you are looking at that point in the season for a like desperate confidence boost, then there might be a bigger problem. Like, then maybe we're actually talking about getting back in on the Lindholm trade talks and like recircle back around to our first question about adding a center. But I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. I know the question was, does it benefit him? But I just don't see like a world where it makes sense for either side, like either him or the team.
Bridgette, potential detour to a fashion segment while we are in the mailbag. So I'm going to go ahead and read off Jeff's question that was emailed to us. And this is Jeff's question. By no means am I minimizing the situation with Lucic, which is unconscionable. However, about a year ago, I finally found my Holy Grail jersey, an authentic 2010 Winter Classic in my size, which happened to be a number 17 with a Lucic nameplate. I think I know the answer, but is there any way to wear it now, or do I just have to eat the money? Is this like having a Kurt Schilling jersey at this point? Be an interesting fashion segment to discuss just how bad does a player have to transgress before you can no longer wear their jersey in public? Does the transgression have to be personal, or can it be professional as well?
First off, I love this question, or questions like this that are just kind of out of the blue. Yeah, I think unfortunately, I don't think you can really wear that in a public setting right now. I will say that when you go to Bruins games at the Garden, you're still seeing a couple Milan Lucic jerseys.
I saw some. Yep, I did. I saw actually a lot.
Yeah, which I think is a bit of a choice. Personally, I would not be wearing that jersey right now. I obviously you hold on to it and you see how it all plays out, and maybe this whole thing ends up not being as bad, or charges a draw. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of rehabilitation down the line where Lucic finds his way back into some good graces. Like, I don't know. That doesn't really seem like it's going to be happening anytime soon, but you just don't really know how these things play out until they're actually done playing out. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one though, because if it does end up bad and there's like a real price for Lucic to pay here, then it almost does kind of become a jersey that you might never really be able to wear again. And I don't know what you do with that. Do you try to get it changed to some other number? Like, is that even possible?
Yes,
I
I
don't
know a
know.
guy. I was actually just
Okay.
going to tell you I know a guy. Like, I'm not even kidding. I know someone that will fix your jersey or turn it into a jacket
I
or
have the simple solution for Jeff. Take some tape, put it over Lucic's name, and type or write with a magic marker, Schaefer. Because I think Peter Schaefer was number 17, wasn't he? Or was he 72 or something? Who was number 17 before Lucic? It wouldn't have been Schaefer because that was the same year they were on the team together. So it wouldn't have been Peter Schaefer. Who was 17 before Lucic?
I was gonna say we haven't done jersey numbers in a while. I gotta.
But
let's see, who do we got?
Well,
for
but the Bruins have been posting them right along for like the centennial season, like on their Instagram. They keep
Zamner was Rob
Zamner was one recently. Nick Foligno, Ryan Donato.
Oh yeah,
it's
that's
a
right.
Nick Foligno jersey then.
There you go, Fliggy.
Except for he wasn't on that. He wasn't with the team that year.
That's
but you
true.
know, people aren't gonna. Hopefully, people don't notice.
I would say to Jeff's question, I think Scott handled it said it pretty well as it pertains to like a public matter like this. It's like until you really know the whole story and exactly what goes down. Until then, maybe just while everybody has their right to wear anything that they purchase, maybe just it might not be the smartest jersey to wear.
This isn't a question that actually one of the other writers that we work with, Matt Poitras, asked me like a few months ago. He was like, for some reason he thought it was, he goes, Bridgette, is there anyone's jersey that if like you went on a first date with someone and they were wearing this jersey that you would be like, nope, they would fail the first date immediately? And I think you could put Milan Lucic in that range now at this point. But
what about a Mac Jones jersey?
No, I mean,
because that's one with
just, meh. But he's not bad.
The second part of Jeff's question was like, or somebody just like their play got worse and worse and worse. Would you not wear the jersey then? And I feel like that's pretty applicable to Mac Jones. There's probably a lot of Mac Jones jerseys that were purchased in 2021 that might be finding their way to the attic.
My go-to on that one was when the Patriots drafted him the first round. As a kid, I got a Lawrence Maroney jersey, and he was basically a bust. And I did not wear that jersey much until like years later, and then I wore it like ironically. It was just like funny to wear a Lawrence Maroney jersey, but yeah, that's why like you gotta get jerseys of established guys who have been around, which obviously Lucic was, unfortunately until very recently.
Lucic was an established guy, and it just like went south. Like, so my other answers were Aaron Hernandez. I said Kyrie Irving. If someone showed up to a first date wearing a Kyrie Irving jersey, I think that would be a red flag.
What if I was wearing a BU DJ Irving jersey, Kyrie's father?
I don't even know, Scott, how to answer that because
one of the greatest players in BU basketball history.
Oh God! You know what? I would never.
You know what's funny is like there were rumors like when Kyrie was in high school that like BU was looking at him. He was looking at BU because of his dad's connection. And it was like Kyrie Irving isn't going to BU, guys. Like he's getting recruited by Duke and every other top program in the country.
No.
So Bridgette, what'd you say? You're just not going to date people with jerseys? Is that what you said?
I'm just not. Yeah, actually, if you show up to a first date with me in a fucking jersey, you leave. Just go back home, please.
I was gonna say like unless you're going to a game, like that's a bold choice.
Hey, nothing.
And also offer to pay for my dinner.
No. Yeah, I mean that's common. That's common etiquette. But I mean, nothing. Nothing says date me like wearing a jersey with some other guy's name on the back of it on your first date. Or female's name. It could be a WNBA jersey or a PWHL jersey. Yeah. We didn't have a fashion segment on those jerseys. Those are pretty bland, huh?
They suck.
The Boston ones?
Yeah. Well, all of them.
They don't have names yet.
They're all template.
Yeah.
Every
but
jersey's the
they're all
same.
they're all like EA Sports create a team. Like, it's just awful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're waiting. I think that those are like the placeholders for when they actually have a determined,
Possibly.
team name besides just Boston.
They start playing next month. What, January 2nd,
January.
right down the street from me at the Songa Center.
Oh my God, what happened to my camera?
Hi, Bridgette.
What the fuck is going on?
Hey! Don't whatever you do, don't call her Two-Face, okay?
I don't even know what to do with this.
Scott, did you say they're playing at Songus?
Unplug it.
Yeah.
That's their home rink?
Yeah.
No.
I thought they were doing like neutral sites for all these games. No, like
no, each city there has like their own home rink, but yeah, the quote unquote Boston team is playing in Lowell. Which,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that actually. Good to know.
I mean, it's cool for Lowell, but like fans in Boston, it's a bit of a trek. I make that drive often.
But it's. I mean, like every team in Boston, it's regional. I mean, everybody from all over this region likes to travel for these games. So
I drive a lot farther.
I mean, Lowell's probably Okay.
Songus is a great rink too.
It is. Where would you have recommended, Scott? I mean, anything's better than Warrior. I mean, the Pride playing at Warrior, it's a great practice facility. That should be it.
Yeah, it's too small, and I do think like other places are just probably would have been tough schedule wise. Like I could say Aganis, but it's like, okay, is Aganis going to be able to, fit their games in regularly when you have, BU already playing there and concerts and events and all whatnot.
Maybe Harvard. They have Northeastern. Matthews is probably a little too old. Yeah.
I don't know. I like Matthews. The reason why I think it's at Songus is because
Bentley's rink's really nice. I don't know how much other stuff they use it for. I mean, that's in Waltham, so you're not right in Boston, but pretty close.
That's true.
Yeah, I just know that weirdly UMass Lowell does not have a women's hockey team. Neither does UMass Amherst. So like they have a little bit more ice time available at Songus because they don't have a men and a women's team there. So
yeah, I mean, Songus back in the day had the Riverhawks, you had the Lock Monsters or the River Rats, whichever one you watch. But for me, it was the Lock Monsters, and then you had, there was a ton of youth games back then as well, and maybe I think Lowell Tech may have played there too, and some other schools. So now
they didn't. And when the Lock Monsters first came, the Riverhawks stayed at, then it was Tully Forum, now Chelmsford Forum. Like they stayed there for a little bit before they finally moved over. But anyways,
real ones remember Tully Forum, not Chelmsford Forum. Scott, good reference.
Well, especially if you're from Billerica, you don't call it Chelmsford Forum because it's technically in Billerica. So
right, exactly. All right, moving along here. Sam emailed us a question. Still stunned that Beecher was benched for the Toronto game, considering the goals he scored and how high his percentages for winning faceoffs. I can't believe I have to ask this question, but do you see any scenario where they send him back to Providence if Monty decides to go with Oscar Steen?
No, I don't, because I think the reasons behind Beecher getting sad are very fixable and were more short-term, hey, take a data reset type thing, and not like long-term issues compounding on top of each other where he's like a net negative to the team. Like we have not seen that. He's even during that stretch where Montgomery saw his game slipping a little bit, like as they reference in the question, like he had 3 goals in the 6 games before that. He's been winning faceoffs, killing penalties. I mentioned on the last podcast, like he was not a minus at 5-on-5 in any game they played in November. So unless things like really went south where he was like out there hurting the team and was on the ice for a bunch of goals against, I don't think him getting sent down is in the cards. Like you'd see more of a rotation maybe on the 4th line before you'd even get to that.
No, I think he's safe, I would say, because of the center pipeline that we've been talking about. I know you referenced this a little bit earlier as well. Scott Geeky can play center, and he does occasionally take shifts at center. Over the last few games, I noticed that, especially like after a power play or after a penalty kill. So he can do that, but I don't see Steen beating Beecher out for a job. First of all, because the position, like what position they need, and also just because I think Beecher, straight from camp all the way through now, has shown he can play that role, and he's a better option than Steen, who's not a center. But so I don't think that the competition, like I know this was actually me that said this last episode, like, showing him that Montgomery showing Beecher, like, hey, we have other guys that we can plug in. More of a scare tactic, but I don't think there's really anything to it that makes me think that he would actually do it, besides just to be like, there's still competition you have to worry about, but like, I think we're still far away from seeing him, like, Beecher put up a performance or a month of performances where he deserves to get passed in the depth chart by anyone. I don't even, it would probably need to be a center as well. So yeah, I think we all said this as well at the time. We're kind of surprised by the benching in the first place. So yeah, I'm not super concerned he's going to lose his job. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think he's at that point. And I also think that, he, like you said, Scott, those fixable things. It's not like, oh, he can develop more. He's, once again, like Laura, he's like 22 or 23. He's not like 18. So, yeah, it's not like he's still making those kinds of mistakes.
Yep, I agree with the two of you. So I'll just move on to the next question. Now, Sam had a second question regarding Poitras, but we're going to lump all the Poitras questions into one because there were multiple of them. So Liz reached out to us and asked, the Bruins have an optional skate this morning, which is Tuesday. Why is that when everyone on the team has talked about how they haven't had enough practice days to work on things?
So I actually asked Jim Montgomery this at said optional practice. And his answer was basically that they just got through a stretch where they had 9 games in 16 days. He said there are some guys battling bumps and bruises. And they just thought like they're going to probably have a pretty hard practice Wednesday. They still had everyone in the building for a video session, so they still went over things that, presumably now they're going to go out on the ice and practice on Wednesday. But I think they just thought it'd be beneficial for guys to kind of do as little or as much as they wanted on Tuesday, not skate them too hard. And guys who wanted to rest or take it easy could. So that's sort of what it seems like, is it's informed more by, they feel like the benefit of maybe a little bit more downtime right now was more advantageous than back-to-back, like, hard practice days.
Bridgette, nothing to add there. Obviously, Scott kind of heard it from coach's mouth. So
yeah, I was gonna say there's nothing to add. Scott was also there, so
not an optional skate for Scott.
No, it wasn't. We made.
I mean, technically it could have been. I could have. No one was forcing me to go, but
yeah, but that's the heart of a champion. Though you just show up even when you don't have to.
I actually went only to ask that question. That is the only reason. No, that wasn't, but it was a benefit.
Yes, he took the mailbag questions and brought them right to coach and was like, "Hey, can you answer some of these for our viewers?"
Yeah, I'm just like, all right, Monty, I've got 8 mailbag questions here.
Got about 10 questions about where Poitras can play. Are you going to say Poitras the junior?
So, Coach, quick question for you. Would you still wear a Lucic jersey? Okay. So
which one would Jim Montgomery rather wear, a Lucic jersey or BU gear?
Right.
Yeah. They're both red flags. Question. They're both red flags.
I'll let Monty answer that one. All right. So Sam and Liz both had questions about Poitras. So I'll quickly just mention their points, and then go into Kim's main question about Poitras. Sam was talking about basically just Poitras moving around lines too much and not having an opportunity to kind of get chemistry, and just let the kid do his thing and find some players that he works with. And then, and also talked about how he draws a lot of penalties. And there was a lack of maybe a lack of standing up for him at times this year. Like in the Panthers game, he got cross-checked and Reeves hitting him from behind, and how Marchand and Heinen, respectively, I think may have tried to do something, but not protecting him as much as maybe his teammates should. And then, yeah, so Kim emailed us this question, and she said, after the San Jose game, I was confident that Monty had finally found the line combinations he had been looking for, moving Marchand to the Poitras-Heinen line, keeping JVR, Coyle, Freddie together, and having Jake play with Pasta, Zacha paid off. All the lines just clicked, and Monty in particular raved about the chemistry and energy of the Marchand, Poitras-Heinen line. It sounded like Monty was planning to keep all three lines together, but flipped Coyle and Poitras just for the Toronto game due to matchups. Fast forward to Sunday, and everything Monty said went out the window, and he kept the Toronto lines for the CBJ game. I'm guessing because Marchand finally scored that Monty won't change the lines back despite the JVR, Poitras, Freddie line not really clicking. However, the JVR, Coyle, Freddie line has been consistently good throughout the season, and there's no argument that Coyle, Freddie thrive together on the same line. Poitras and Heinen have already developed great chemistry, and with Marchand driving the line, you could tell they were going to be a force to be reckoned with. So of that, here's her question. Do you all feel that the top three lines from the San Jose game should have stayed together? Do you think we will see them together again?
I liked those lines. I agree with her. I think that, it was against San Jose, which we we kind of like preface, but I think that those were lines that I was hoping to see for a longer period of time, because putting DeBrusk with Pasta and Zacha made sense. And they did have flashes. I thought they had a good game. Coach, for whatever reason, seemed to not be as enthusiastic about that line. But Poitras with Marchand and Heinen, who we've talked about, outperforming what we thought he could do and being a very complimentary player, set up one of Marchand's most recent goals. So, like, he's still, I see that Poitras with Marchand and Heinen should still be similar than with Coyle. Like, I don't necessarily understand the reasoning to take Coyle away from JVR and Freddie. I thought that obviously Coyle played well with Marchand and Heinen, but it feels like too much of a detraction from what he could be adding to a different line. And also, it was weird with JVR and Poitras, and something about that just wasn't working for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I think it was matchup based against Toronto, and I think if it sticks, and obviously it did stick Sunday night against Columbus, which I wonder if part of that is, hey, you're playing a back-to-back, and we liked the way things looked against Toronto, so without any sort of practice in between, might as well just stick with it for another game. I will be interested to see Wednesday at practice what the lines look like. But I also think part of this is the role and the kinds of shifts Poitras is going to get. Because if you're with Marchand, then you're seeing opponents, one of their top checking lines, one of their top two defense pairs. You're getting, probably fairly significant minutes. We've seen Montgomery clearly doesn't totally trust Poitras in third period of games yet, protecting leads. So I think by putting Coyle with Marchand and Heinen, in Montgomery's mind, I think that creates more of a true second line that he's going to be able to roll out in any situation, any matchup, third period, protecting leads, anything. And he doesn't have to worry about at least changing that up as the game goes on. You put Poitras with Van Riemsdyk and Frederick, and you can kind of protect him, shelter him a little more when it comes to matchups. So, I do agree that line hasn't really clicked yet, but I also don't think it's been a disaster. I think there's something there that you can try to build on. So I'm going to be interested to see if Montgomery kind of sticks with that lineup and gives those lines a chance to build, or does he go back to Marcia and Patra Heinen, which did certainly flash in that one game they had together. Although, as you mentioned, it was against San Jose, the worst team in the NHL.
Yeah, which is why we would like to see it, how it could work against a more middle of the road team, not necessarily the last team, but yeah. And you know what, we keep coming back to this idea of maybe Poitras not being ready to handle all situations, but it kind of drives me crazy that why are we sheltering him and babying him this much? I feel like he can grow and he can learn from playing in those situations. To put him next to Freddie, I mean, in terms of having someone to stick up for him, Frederick can do that. We've seen him fight. We know he's probably one of the only guys that is willing to do that on this team this year. So that's an option for you, I guess. But it felt like Marchand and Poitras finally were kind of getting that chemistry. And then, we don't get a chance to see it over the next 2 games. So it's weird. It's just sometimes it feels like, and it felt like this in the playoffs last year at times, just over tinkering at times. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the last part of the question, I definitely think we'll see those lines again. I think I don't take too much stock in the lines too much at different points in the regular season, just because there's always, the regular season is so long. Sometimes the lines change because you're trying to get one specific guy going, and there's a butterfly effect everywhere else in the lineup. Sometimes it is matchup dependent. So with that said, I think another reason would be to change the lines is, yes, to see what you have with certain combinations. I think there's a fine line between changing the lines throughout the regular season for different reasons to keep things fresh, and then changing the lines too much. You do want to give certain lines 5-game sample sizes, I think. And if you do that, you're still going to have plenty of combinations to tinker with all year. But it just seems like Montgomery does it too quick, too frequent. You can let a line go together for 3-4 games, and you still have another, 78, 70 to, I'm talking if this was October, you know what I mean? So it's I think he needs to let things breathe just a little bit more. It's unrealistic to expect him to pick 4 lines and roll with them all year, but he's got to find a bit of a better balance, I think. And again, with somebody like Poitras, it's I think the Bruins kind of hope that he can be a top 6 fixture for them at some point later in the season. And the only way he's going to get there is by logging top 6 minutes with top 6 players around him, playing against other top 6 players on the opposition. So, yeah,
I want to make just a comparison. I know it's not, obviously pros in college are very different, but when you see, the reason I'm making it is because of how young Poitras is. You very rarely see this kind of line tinkering, that a coach doing it in college, at the college level. They're trying to establish chemistry. They're trying to establish consistency. You very rarely see the kind of changing and playing somebody so young with so many different line mates and mixing it up every single night. It's intentional in college to keep guys together and let them grow and build chemistry and fight through some of the learning curves. But because it's the NHL, most guys can handle it. But we're talking specifically about someone who is very young and continuing to grow, and sometimes just a little bit of stability could go a long way. So, sometimes we're saying, okay, maybe he's not contributing as much as we thought he would. Well, maybe it's because he hasn't been able to settle in and feel comfortable. This is his, these are my guys that I work with. These are the looks I this is where I know Marchand's going to be. And then all of a sudden, oh, Marchand's not on my line anymore. just maybe a little bit more consistency for a kid that's 19 years old would help.
I mean, certainly it could. I personally, like, I don't really think it's doing any harm moving him around and getting him looks with different wingers. It's also new to him that, like, I don't know, like he's not expecting to, or he shouldn't be expecting to get like 10 games straight playing with Brad Marchand. Like, I think Matt Poitras is probably pretty happy with just being here and playing, period. And so,
well, yeah,
moving things around and, you know, figuring out what works and what you want to do in certain games. Like, I'm fine with it. Sometimes, yes, Montgomery can change things too much. But to me, like, I'm just okay with doing it as the year goes on. Like, I think it's fine. I think you kind of want everyone to be able to play with everyone anyways, because we saw this last year, especially the second half of the season, they did have settled lines for a long stretch. And then you get to the end of the season in the playoffs and there's injuries and you have to move things around, and all of a sudden guys are playing with guys they maybe haven't been on a line with in a couple months. So I don't think there's really a whole lot of harm in it. Last thing to note here, because I think we briefly touched on it, but I think it was Sam who said, speaking of Poitras, he has to have drawn the most penalties on the team. Is that true? Good instincts, Sam, because Matt Poitras is tied for the team lead in penalties drawn with Brad Marchand. They have each drawn 13 penalties. David Pasternak's third with 10 drawn. Charlie McAvoy has drawn 9, which is usually defensemen don't draw a lot of penalties, so that's pretty impressive for McAvoy to be up there too.
All right, so we have 3 questions remaining. I think we can answer them relatively quick, so let's try to rattle through them. One is actually not a specific question. It's more something Scott's been seeing in his mentions on Twitter. And the sentiment is this still a transition year for the Bruins? Is anything they win just a bonus, or should they be all in trying to win the cup now?
Yeah, so this was me kind of summarizing. I think this came off of the Poitras discussion too, because one of the comments that sort of sparked this off was that, like, they should just, you know, not be afraid to, like, play Poitras more, play him up in the lineup, because this year should be more about development anyways. And while, yes, developing players is important, and, you know, they are going to do that, you also currently have the second best record in the NHL. So guess what? This season's about winning. Like, sorry, but you don't get into December with the second best record in the NHL and have it be a transition year. Like, you're trying to win now. So I know the Bruins said all along, going back to the offseason, that was their expectation. And I know, you know, all of us collectively probably had mixed opinions on, you know, whether they really believe that or whether that was realistic. But here they are, you know, 2 months into the season with the second best record in the league. Like, it's not winning a playoff round or 2 isn't, to me, like, that's not just gravy at this point. Like, that's what you're trying to do. And you can't take any contending season for granted. So when it's here, you got to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're being completely honest, roster aside, because it's, you know, especially at center, it's very different. They're in the same position that they were last season. Like, they're standings wise, like, same exact position to set themselves up for a deep playoff run. I mean, even if they were going to be a wild card team, like set up for a wild card team, like, no, you're still taking a run. Like you mentioned, you can't take any of those years for granted, and you're set up pretty well. You still have a great defense and 2 great goaltenders. You're still a contender. This is not a transition year. Just because you have turnover and different personnel doesn't mean, like, oh, you know, we have to figure out how to work with these people. Like, no, like, you actually find yourself in a position where you can have the same mindset as last year, which is, you know, we got one more shot at this. Because then you never know about after that. I think it's been such a pleasant surprise for the organization and for fans that there wasn't a drop off from last season, despite the fact that you lose Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, and you're dealing with cap issues. The fact that they are where they are right now is pretty, I think you guys would agree, above where we thought they would be at this point in the season. Just because of those factors of personnel changes, and not necessarily knowing how some of the free agent signings were going to be. And a lot of them have worked out great. The Lucci one, not so much, but for an unforeseeable reason. And yeah, it's you're all in again. Like we're talking about a team that's going to be buyers at the trade deadline again. Hopefully they can find a way to have the cap space for that, which, by the way, Scott, this is probably something you don't have like off the top of your head, but how much cap space, and we can maybe look this up, how much cap space did they have last year at the trade deadline? Because they made a lot of moves last year, and I just don't.
They had a lot because Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno were on long-term IR.
That's right. And the timing of that was also like, couldn't have worked out more in the Bruins' favor in terms of when those guys were set to come back and whatnot. But yeah, like they were able to make so many moves last year because of that. Anyway, yeah, they had a lot of space compared to we don't think they're going to have that kind of space this year. So.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Bruins are where they are in the standings because it's indicative of their record against all of their peers and their counterparts. And you can sit there and say that going into the season, you had questions about their personnel on paper, and maybe you still do. But you know what? There are teams on paper that may not have had the certain questions that the Bruins had, but for some reason, they're not in a position where anything's a guarantee for them. I mean, the New Jersey Devils come to mind. Like, people had them as favorites in the East going into this year, and they've struggled pretty mightily. You never know what's going to happen. If we've learned anything from last year in the postseason, is that when you think that the team is bound for success and set up perfectly, you can be bounced in the first round. And the Florida Panthers taught everybody that it doesn't matter. You just have to get in. So it doesn't. If you think that the Bruins don't have, despite their place in the standings, which is again earned by playing against everybody around them, which is the entire league that they're in. If you don't think that on paper they are a true Stanley Cup contender, what I would say to you is it doesn't matter what you think, because we were all proven wrong last year. They had that team last year, and they had the earliest spring of anybody that made the playoffs. And Florida, I still feel this way. Outside of a couple players, I didn't even think that their roster was even much to scoff at. I mean, you had their fourth line was a bunch of people nobody heard of. Their D-core, besides Montour and Ekblad, they had a few players. They taught everybody a lesson. So as long as the team is there, I like what you guys said, don't take it for granted. Anything can happen, whether you think the roster lacks something on paper or not. You just got to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is, like, all that said, like, yes, it's true that they almost certainly can't go all in to the extent that they did last year. As Bridgette mentioned, there's cap issues. Unless they have another LTIR situation, they're not going to be able to add without subtracting something off the current roster. Also, like, they traded away 2 first-round picks at the deadline last year. They go into this deadline, they don't have a pick in the first, second, or third round in this coming draft. They don't have their second-round pick next year. Like, just from a pure what you can do, like, yeah, you can't do as much as you did last year, but that doesn't mean you can't add. Like, that there's still ways to get it done if you work hard enough. So,
and that could be a blessing in disguise, because sometimes when you do add, things just don't work out the way you want them to for one reason or another. Too many chefs in the kitchen. You just lack a chemistry. You don't know. It doesn't. So be careful what you wish for, I guess, is the point. All right, 2 final questions here. We have George on YouTube, kind of piggybacking off that last one, but did anyone see 3 rookies and a bunch of bargain bin veterans being instrumental in taking this team to the position they are currently in, second overall in the league?
No, I don't. Obviously, I don't think anyone expected them to be this high up in the standings. We all picked them to make the playoffs. I think. Did we all have them second in the division, or?
I think so. I don't think any of us picked them first.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I mean, we all thought they would be good and that they'd be a playoff team, but yeah, certainly they've won at a higher rate than I think anyone anticipated, and no one expected Matt Poitras to be part of the equation. I think, we all felt like Johnny Beecher had a chance to push for a roster spot, after a full year down in Providence. But yeah, Poitra's obviously been surprising. The contributions of those. Look, having two of your four regular centers be rookies, like that's no small task. That's the kind of thing you normally see on a rebuilding team, not one that's second in the NHL in the standings. And you know, Jim Montgomery's talked about that at different times this year about like how the challenges that presents because for a couple like just being a rookie in the NHL by itself carries a ton of learning curves. Being a center carries even more of them. And being a center for the Bruins, where they have so many demands of their centers of what they're expected to do, like it's not easy. And that's why there's been some growing pains, and it's why I'm not shocked when Montgomery, sits Poitras in the third period of a game or gives Beecher a night off. It's like they're throwing a lot at these kids, and for the most part, they've handled it really well. But like, they're not finished products yet, and they're still going to make mistakes. And the Bruins have to find the right balance between letting them work through it while also still trying to win games because they are a contender and every point matters.
Yeah, I don't know how much to add either here because I feel like we kind of went over it, not specifically talking about the rookies necessarily, but that the team has done a lot better than expected, and that includes the individual performances of a Matt Poitras, who we thought was going to go back to Guelph, before he had such a great preseason, and then we know what happened from there. Like he's established himself. I think both centers, so Beecher and Poitras won those jobs from other people. So they've shown that they could steal those jobs and hold on to them. Lohrei came up briefly, went back down, but he looked to be like not 100% NHL ready, but right there. I mean, if you needed him, he could be. But it was good to see that you have options that are younger that are coming up, that you like and that seem like they're going to be fits for the future, because you can kind of start projecting forward like what Poitras might be in his career, and if the Bruins, I know we talked about potentially trading Lohrei for Hanifin, but like say they hold on to Lohrei like as a prospect into a player that they keep around for a long time, you can kind of start seeing what they have. And it's just a kind of a good combination of cheap contracts for one reason or the other, because like we mentioned JVR coming in as a complete bargain for a really good player who has a lot left. And then same thing on the young end with Poitras being 19 and exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I mean, we knew based on goaltending, defense, and just team structure overall, and some high end talent up front that they would be a competitive team and a playoff team as we all predicted. But there were a lot of questions that if the answer was yes, this team could have something. If the answer was no, it might be tough to maybe they'd be a bubble team or something. And those questions were: will Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha, will they sink or swim in these elevated roles? And so far they're swimming. Can JVR be anything of what he used to be in the NHL production wise, or is he going to be the player he was in Philly last year where he didn't have much production at all, and he's been revived? So that answer is a yes. And then nobody saw, as you guys mentioned, Poitras coming into the picture. And then Beecher, it was a yeah, we'll see, and he's been a pleasant surprise. So yeah, it's been fun to watch so far. The final question is regarding defense. And Scott, you've mentioned in the past that the Bruins are obviously excellent by all defensive metrics, but where they are weak is in transition. They give up a lot of transition opportunities. So this final question is related to that. What is causing all the odd man rushes they give up? Is it simply bad decision making by the D-man, or forwards not dropping back, or both?
Yeah, so I think I guess what I'd say is the biggest problem is just in general puck management. There's been too many turnovers right inside of the offensive zone, too many one and dones in the offensive zone, and that allows teams to kind of quickly reload and come right back at you. We know the Bruins play, a pretty aggressive system in transition with defensemen jumping up. They use that weak side D a lot. But the give and take there is like, if you don't manage the puck well and you turn it over on your rush, well, now you already have a defenseman caught up ice. So, whether it's maybe a center hasn't hung back enough or whatever, like you're not in the right position to defend that rush coming back at you. So there's, probably other little things we could talk about, like technique wise, that I'm sure the Bruins are looking at on video, but the biggest overarching thing that it comes back to is puck management. Like, it's turning it over on a zone entry. It's, a defenseman pinching down the wall and then the forward makes a bad pass. Like, just things like that, just not taking care of the puck is, I think, so it's not really necessarily on the forwards or defense one more than the other. It's just team wide not taking care of the puck enough.
Yeah, like specifically, usually this is where the rush starts from, is like your ozone blue line. If you make a stupid play at your ozone blue line, either it like a shot that gets blocked immediately, a pass that doesn't connect, or like you said, you get caught in too deep, like that all of a sudden you're turning around and trying to catch up to the guys that took the puck away and are heading towards your net. So yeah, it a lot of it happens in that area of the ice.
Yeah, and I think when you're playing good team defense transitionally, it's your defense and your forwards coming back there. There's cohesion there. It's kind of like a slinky or an accordion when it kind of like comes together. It's like you want the D to be able to step up and have good gap control, knowing that they have back pressure from their forwards. As far as why the odd man rushes are taking place in the first place, it would be, to Scott's point, lack of puck management, and then from there, yeah, it's just a matter of decision making and just playing as a 5-man unit. All right, Bridgette and Scott, any final response to this question or other questions or any other takes?
Yeah. So one last note on this, because it just worked out that Megan Shaka, who does some work with like Stathletes and hockey analytics, tweeted out today, as we're recording, NHL odd man rushes against, which we had touched. So probably about a month ago, Nesson had this as a stat, and the Bruins had given up the second most odd man rushes per game. At that point, these are not publicly available stats, but she tweeted all 32 teams where they rank, and the Bruins are 26th. So again, still not good, but they're not the second worst anymore. And if you look at like teams around them, like there are other good teams there that have been struggling with this. Like the Bruins are right ahead of the Rangers. Vegas is just ahead of the Bruins. Toronto, Tampa are right there. Dallas is not too far ahead of them. Like, those are good teams. And I guess, the takeaway there would be like, to me, those are all teams that want to be aggressive and get their defensemen involved. So you can kind of see, like, especially early in the year, teams can struggle with that. The teams at the top, the teams that are giving up the fewest, also very good teams, and ones that, maybe are, I don't know, a little more structured, I guess, but like the Kings are the best in the NHL by a lot. Carolina, New Jersey, Vancouver, Florida is the top 5. So it's kind of a mix of like some of the top teams are up there really good at it, and others are kind of where the Bruins are, where it's been a little bit of a struggle.
All right. Well, there you have it. So thank God, thank the heavens for Scott and his ability to pull those stats out of his ass like that. Right when we're recording, so we can tie it all together and put a bow on top. So that would conclude all the questions for this week. Thank you for sending them all in. There was plenty to discuss and go over all over the map. Bridgette and Scott, any topics that you were surprised weren't asked about?
No,
DeBrusque?
I think actually, that's a good one.
That one, yeah.
He'll continue to be a talking point all year. I would imagine if this year is the same as the last 6 he's been in Boston, or maybe the last 3 he's been in Boston, probably.
Not surprisingly, we don't get a lot about the goalies just because they kind of just do what they do their thing and do it the right way. And it's just, not something that even comes up a lot. So not surprised. I think every mailbag episode we had this year so far, it's like Poitras heavy are the questions we're getting.
I'm surprised. There was a question about Lindholm, but it wasn't the Lindholm I'm thinking of. I'm surprised, maybe a little surprised. Just in general, I feel like Lindholm hasn't been too harped on by fans and spectators alike. I think, he still hasn't picked up his production at all. I still think he's obviously good, but he's supposed to be a great player in this league and not just a good one. And I just don't see him being a difference maker nearly enough to his standards. So I guess it's a long year. I'd rather him play great in the spring as over right now in December. But I don't know. I'm surprised about him still.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's been, I don't know, just sort of like an accept, like as long as he's not noticeable good or bad, like people are just sort of letting it ride for now. But it's like he's at least put up a few points. It's not, like early on in the year, it was like 10 games without a point or something like that. And I feel like we haven't seen early in the year. It felt like there were maybe a few more turnovers that ended up in the back of the net or ended up in scoring chances, and there haven't been as many of those. So it's like his game's just sort of been quiet, and I think people don't really talk about quiet games.
The first year and a half of having him, you had 2 number 1 defensemen on this team, in my opinion, and if one wasn't one on one night, the other one was, and he hasn't been that this year. And the whole question we had earlier on in the episode about Noah Hanifin, the prospect of bringing Noah Hanifin to Boston, I feel like I wouldn't have. I'm a lot more open to it right now because with the way Lindholm is playing, I do want that that stacked top 4. Whereas if Lindholm was still playing as like a number 1 D man, like I don't know if I would even entertain the Hanifin thing as much. And maybe that's an unfair statement because it's only 2 months into the season. But I just think if Lindholm's going to be that conservative stay-at-home guy with Carlo, then I do think they need more offense in the back end. I think the numbers would show that too.
Of course, yeah. Brian brought it back around to Lindholm.
Someone's got to do it.
Not entirely surprised. Maybe he's a sleeping giant. Maybe, maybe some point in this season, it's like, oh, okay, there he is. The guy that we saw back when he played his best when McAvoy was out. Probably, but even when he first got brought in for the Bruins, he still has that ability. Maybe it wakes up at some point. I think that's why Brian brings him up a lot, is because it's like we know it's there. It's not like it's because the bar is so high that he's above other people's bars, but we know that his is he's a good contributor offensively when he's at the top of his game. So I know that's why Brian brings it up.
I do also wonder, like we talked about forward lines, I do also wonder if at some point do we see more Lindholm McAvoy again? Like they had one game together and they get shifts together from time to time, obviously, but maybe a more concerted effort like could really benefit both of them, get both of them going. Because I do think like when Lindholm's with Carlo, it's just by its nature a more defensive pairing and maybe not quite as involved offensively, because on the one hand, it's like you can say that, oh, Carlo's a safety blanket, he should allow Lindholm to get more involved. But on the other, like offense is a 5-man game, and being on a pairing with Charlie McAvoy, you're going to be more involved offensively than being with Brandon Carlo.
Well, and especially if the whole counterpoint to putting Lindholm with Carlo is because, well, McAvoy and Grizzly are so good together. Well, that's great, but with 1 point in 14 games, whatever it's been, I mean, Grizzly needs to step up a little bit too if he wants to keep that argument alive, at least to the point where you're keeping Lindholm away from McAvoy. So, anyway, fun episode, lots to talk about. And Bridgette and Scott, any final thoughts before we go?
I wanted to echo something I saw DJ Bean brought up on the latest What Chaos show, but we didn't talk about it. But after Marchand's hat trick, they played Frankie Valli's "Can't Take My Eyes Off of You," and like the whole crowd was singing along, and that was awesome. And they should play that more. Like, I am absolutely on board with that take because it's way better than like a "Living on a Prayer" sing along, which has been overdone for decades. That was a cool moment.
I love it. So, Bridgette, I'm gonna have to have you film Scott next time that song comes on at the Garden and send it over, okay? And maybe we can tweet it out from the account.
How about they film me every time I sing to Scott "That's What Makes You Beautiful" by One Direction?
There you go. All right, so Bruins are off until Thursday. They play the Sabres, and then they play the Coyotes, I think, maybe Saturday or Sunday. So
Saturday, the Coyotes, who just keep beating Stanley Cup champions. Like, I think someone tweeted they've in like the last, or it's a few days out of date now, but in like a 10-day span, they beat the last 5 Stanley Cup winners or something, or like a 2-week span. Like, by the way, Coyotes in a playoff spot right now. So,
yep, it's a 1:00 game at the Garden. Scotty will be there
against the Coyotes.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for listening and submitting questions, and we will talk to you very soon. Hey, guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.